Hey, this is Rusty again, and here is my response for 5.2b, racialization of society. In Tracing the Trade, it asks, what role does racialization play in the creation and maintenance of an industry and commerce in Bristol, Rhode Island? We learned in the video that the whole town lived off the slave trade, that the rum was being built and multiple different cities were involved with that the metal workers and the shipbuilders were all participating in the slave trade. And then we learned that people owned 1 to 2 slaves, and those slaves made miles and miles of rock wall. And in fact, the video said that the rock wall could have gone all the way to the moon. They said that multiple towns were involved, and one race did the hard labor of work around town. So the differences between people showed the way that commerce and things were built. To what extent do you believe the advantages and disadvantages caused by racialization may still be in effect in Bristol? Well, it seems that the history of it was hidden in plain sight. Like it was celebrated almost in their parades and their artwork, but it was never talked about. We have mansions built by slave trade and slave owners as a historic building in town. So that continues to have an effect on the town. The fact that so many of the people in the video were going to Ivy League colleges shows the advantages or the privilege that they had. And as we saw in the parades and in the video, the town is still a predominantly white town. So these advantages or disadvantages show up as we see who is in the town. What issues held significant meaning or raised questions for me or stirred strong emotions? This is one of the first times that I remember hearing about historic slave trade in the North. Hearing about the difference from the South, but how strong the slave trade really was in the North. I think that I fell for the fact that I learned in history that slave trade ended in the North sooner, and there was such a division between the North and the South. But this strong trade of slaves in the North was surprising to me. The fact that there was missionaries on the boats, that these people claiming to be Christ followers knew what was going on, were compliant to what was going on, and didn't do anything about it. The fact that there was a church right above the slave quarters when they visited in Ghana, and that stirred emotions to me. How small the space was for those that were in the slave industry. It kind of shocked me that the people around the table did not see their privilege in getting into Harvard and their desire, and when they were talking as a family about the one guy needed to know that he would be forgiven if he was going to admit a mistake. And that to me goes against all kinds of apologies or even admitting there's a problem, is needing to know that there'll be forgiveness on the other end. That just built up emotion in me. As I went to the next video, the difference between us, race and power illusion, it says, to what extent do you think belief in the illusion of race contributes to the creation and perpetuation of perceptions that lead to racialization? When we think that there is a gene difference, then we think, of course we see a difference in race. There's the whole theory of inferiority from one race to another. And then saying once we're disproved of that maybe one race is superior to another, like in things like athletics when Jesse Owens showed his amazing racing ability. There is a difference, so we must see that difference, even though, as we learned in the video, race in America is completely a social construct. The fact that eugenics is even a thing, that it was a scientific study to try to prove the differences and trying to prove one race superiority towards another race, and that one race would be extinct because they're inferior genes. It shows a illusion of race. The illusion of race has influenced my thinking about people whose ethnicity is different than mine, is that I have also fallen into and fell for the trap that there must be a difference beyond just nurture. It's caused me to make judgments based on looks and not on who people really are. And it's in my life, I've bought into the illusion of race in things like athletics and performance in those categories. What issues had significance or stirred up emotions for me in this video? The idea of a racial smog, that race is not biological but a cultural thing based on a color. And I was not aware at this point, I think that I can recall, that there is no difference DNA-wise, that there is no racial markers to be able to tell one person apart from another person as far as their race. That was eye-opening to me, to realize that truth, that there really is no difference in the way that we're made, in the way that we're put together in our DNA level when it comes to race. So in conclusion, from watching these two videos and thinking about the reading, how is that going to affect my ministry going forward? The first thing is, this has been an eye-opening experience for me. It's been good to be able to read about the history and see the history of how advantages and privileges have played a part in where we are racially. It was good for me to think through and realize that this is not an individualization problem, this is a systematic problem. And I need to be thinking much more in terms of systems instead of in individual instances. It was actually a new concept for me to think about a racialized society and a systematic problem over individual. To think about the fact that race in America is a social construct, not a biological one. And so for me, it starts with awareness. There is a different level of awareness that I now have than I had before, and I feel a responsibility to help others have that awareness. Second, it's caused me a desire to hear stories instead of going in with a colorblind idolization, thinking that everyone has the same story. I want to take time to listen to stories. And I need to, when planning an event, think through, what does that event look like from a non-privileged perspective? How would participating in the event look from a non-privileged perspective? That I need to be thinking in systems, how I can be a part of changing the system and not just individually. This has been a great assignment, and I've really appreciated being able to think through these topics.